the economic growth or recuperation from the Europe in this regard. But it's not the only place, it's across the globe. But of course, there were different views with regard to that negative impact of the economic crisis. Now, this is also very important because we have to remember that in the year 2000, we come up at the UN with the idea of these Millennium Development Goals following the conference on Millennium Goal, or the Millennium Conference. And the basic idea was to, in a way, to go or to move from a very Christmas tree commitment in terms of development to the opposite, meaning going to just 8 single goals that should be addressed or accomplished in a supposedly very easily way, because they're limited, they were concrete, they have target, so everything coming from a mathematic point of view should be simply implement. Now, what happened in the year 2014, if we assess this transition? Unfortunately, there, of course, I have to recognize there is a lot of progress in many countries across the globe, and there's no just a single assessment on the implementation or on the progress of MDG across the globe. But mostly, or collectively, we can say that unfortunately the international community was not able to achieve the MDGs in a full manner that really benefiting people. And more than that, if you are following what Secretary General reports are saying with regard to the assessment of MDGs, we come up with a very, very critical message that in my personal point of view, I think reflects what I'm going to say about my views with regard to the post-2015 development agenda. And it's the following. Secretary General acknowledged that, collectively speaking, we were able to achieve MDG 1, meaning that really international community achieved or reducing poverty by 50%. Now the question is, so what? And that's the real challenge for the international community, because even though achieving this important goal, collectively speaking, is not enough. And it's not enough because it does not have the impact in terms of development across the planet that we were supposed to have achieving this goal by in itself, is what I meant. In itself is what I meant. So this is real a challenge for everyone, because we are in a way having an enormous or a Christmas tree commitment that were not fulfilled. Then we move to the very short and narrow approach with 8 goals that also were not achieved or fulfilled. And then what? I mean, what's the option? In terms of the UN analysis, and before to giving my perspective on this, we have to take into account another, let's say, source or another equation that to be entered in this big picture, which is the just recently had Rio Conference +20 held last year in Rio de Janeiro again, where member states decided to come up with SDGs, or Sustainable Development Goals. It's important because, in a way, what we are saying now is that we need to have a broader discussion in terms of the MDGs and moving away from this narrow approach, and to include in the equation the concept of sustainable development that is at the core of development for many countries. And not only because address economic growth or social inclusion, which are already contained in certain ways in the MDGs, but because we include the concept of economic or the environmental protection that of course goes in the line of many things, including climate change negotiation, including natural disaster management, or any other issues related to environmental that were out of the equation in the MDGs. Now, this poses, of course, an important challenge for us collectively because in a way, in accordance to what the tradition of the business as usual UN, we have to come up with a middle ground between the larger commitment to the narrow commitment. So we have to find out, a middle point between those things. The current exercise that has been done already by the Working Group on Sustainable Development and then the SDGs and so on, has come out with that 19 kind of clusters. Now, this is the point. I personally believe that we are in a crossroad in the sense that we have to realize that if we really are serious in order to address development, there are two conditions that need to be achieved. One of them is already in place and agreed by the General Assembly, but not fully understood, or at least not fully have a common understanding on it. And I'm referring to the decision of the General Assembly to include in the post-2015 development agenda the principle of universality. This, in my personal view, is a keystone or the cornerstone for the next post-2015 development agenda. Because for the first time, like it or not, member states recognize implicitly that the wrong with our approach was based on the concept of development. Because development in the previous experience were related only to developing countries. Because there was this understanding that, okay, I'm a developed country, so I got a top or a roof of development, and then I can go beyond than that, because I got the top, the roof. So in that regard, I just need to set standards, and everybody has to follow me. Is that were the case, then with the decision of PRC, for example, to follow development pattern of consumption of the United States, we have no planet where to live. It's simple like that. 1.9 billion people can't just follow the step by the US, to say the least, in terms of development. However, if we accept the idea that development is not just a matter of developing country, but it's a concept, an ongoing process that every country in the planet are involved in. But of course, there are different levels of development, but not the idea that we have come up to a proof. But everybody needs to continue development because this is an ongoing process that goes to the infinite. Because it's connected to the, of course, evolution of the human being and evolution of our consciousness and the evolution of the planet itself. Why? Because it's alive. And that's precisely part of the message that we are receiving from the environmental side that was left behind when we just focus our attention on the MDGs. The living planet where we live is connected with us because we, are unfortunately the ones who believe that run the planet. But isn't the opposite? The planet is running by itself and we're part of it. So we are addressing development in a different perspective. That's the reason why we are not able to connect the whole issue of development to the real world, like it or not, knowing it or not, acknowledging it or not, because the planet doesn't care if we understand or not what is involved. And in this regard, so the challenge now is then to make sure that in this upcoming post-2015 development agenda, we need to make sure to put at the center of development the human being. But not traditionally conceived as in the sustainable development conception. We need to put the center the human being, but in all cycle of its life. Meaning by that we need to understand the human being as a child, as a youth, as an adolescent, a mature person, an elderly. Because that's the only thing that is in common in all countries across the planet. We have different levels of development, but what we have in common is human beings in the planet. Now, if we are in this path, we will be able then to come up with all these cross-cutting issues Like for example, gender perspective. Gender perspective can be understood, and also the one standing alone goal from the UN Women and others, of course my country supporting that as well, but it doesn't have any meaning if we come up with a standing goal alone of gender issues if we have the same north-south approach to the post-2015 development agenda. That is not working. We need to have a cross-cutting gender perspective, a cross-cutting children perspective, a cross-cutting elderly perspective, a cross-cutting indigenous community or indigenous people perspective. We need to come up with a cross-cutting person with disabilities perspective, Afro-American people perspective, family perspective. But because it's not a linear development, but a spiral. And that's the difference, because we have to understand that development is no moving from point A moving to point B, but in a cycle, as the life is, and in connection with the planet is doing as well. So this is a challenge, of course, because represent an opportunity to really move from the current paradigm based on competition to a paradigm based in cooperation. But again, cooperation not understood as traditionally North-South cooperation, but a cooperation between equals. That goes to the line of partnership. And then, of course, I know we have different views with regard to the concept of farming, what that means. Well, we already have an MDGA. But the point is not that. The point is that what we need to move, or what we need to change is our paradigm, because that's the basis for the current unfulfillment on the development issues in our planet. Now, how all these ideas are related to women's situations in El Salvador and other countries. In our particular case, as you have been seeing this video, our country come up with an idea that in my view is very interesting to consider at least, which is simple, which is, okay, let's have one-stop shop, meaning to have one site where government, that has no, let's say, that is not rich in resources, but we are a middle-income country, where we can combine all services provided by the government in one specific site, and have a comprehensive view on women's and gender perspective. And why is that? Well, number one, because in El Salvador, 52% of our total populations are women. That means that if we are going to address issues like democracy, for example, and taking into account that democracy means that is majority over minority, then we need to include gender perspective because it's the basis for democracy in my country, just based in a figures issues. But more than that is because the concept of the other element that I would like to connect it in El Salvador, but also to the international discussion, which is the following. These sites, we have currently 5 of them, are located in the rural area. Why in the rural area? Because it's where most women need it. I mean, I'm not saying that in the urban it's not needed, but in the urban cities you have access and easily access to services, but in the rural area it's very difficult. Anyway, in El Salvador it's only 20,000 square kilometers. So you have 4 hours to cross from east to west the whole country. So in a way, rural area is a concept that, I don't know, I mean, maybe we can reconsider the expansion on the impact of that concept. But the point is that if we are able to connect these kind of sites or one-stop shop that provide women's different services in all areas or all spectrums of the needs, including, for example, in the health issues, sexual and reproductive rights, legal issues, addressing violence against women, providing access to credit and financial support, providing training for making an entrepreneurship, addressing issues on agriculture, on making sure that women can have access to agriculture and land and property through legal issues, or the simple thing like having an ID. That's elements. If where is our, or because our addresses that you see in this video, in just one single way, we are saving time, people, we are saving money, but at the same time, we are creating an opportunity for empowerment of women. And the best of all is just running by women. Men are not allowed in Ciudad Mujer, either as a service provider or just visiting. And why is that? Well, very simple. One of the most interesting challenges in our country is related to violence against women. So if you are, in a way, suffer from domestic violence or any kind of violation, including rape, you are not, I mean, women not necessarily trust in men, even if a police. We have a police unit in every Ciudad Mujer that is women as well. So this kind of element complements the idea of our country to promote actively gender equality, but it's not limited to that. There are other important services provided by ISDEMO, which is the national institution dealing with the advancement of women in addressing violence against women, in the normative framework, creating a lot of laws that goes encompass to the international conventions like CEDAW, but also Belém do Pará, Brazil, on addressing discrimination and violations, you know, all this stuff. Now, I would like to connect, well, as I said before, another element that is on the flow and connected to my previous ideas on the post-2015 development agenda, and it's the following. We are about to celebrate an international conference on habitat. It's called Habitat 3, probably in 2016. And this idea is very important because what we're trying to connect is a kind of sustainable cities. Now, if you remember, many years ago, there was this very intense debate at the international level on, you know, urbanization versus rural areas. Well, this debate is no longer, or at least should not be, this debate again. Because a sustainable city can be either in a rural or in an urban city. There's no contradiction on the concept in itself, because sustainability comes from a different background concept that is encompassed to the new trends on development. And this concept is very important, and I would like to share with you a simple example of what I'm referring to. In my country, El Salvador, I can identify 6 different models of sustainable cities. You know, we have one in Santa Tecla, one in the area metropolitana de San Salvador or Zona Rosa. We have one in Suchitoto. We have one in Antiguo Cucatlán. We have another in Nuevo Cucatlán. And there's one city in La Unión that I always forgot, right? But the point here is the following. If in a very small country, 2,000 square kilometers, 6 million people, we can identify 6 different models of sustainable cities that are either in the urban areas and the rural areas, and that you cannot simply replicate what is happening in one city to the other because it's not working. Can you imagine what's going on in countries like PRC, in countries like Brazil, in countries like India, or others, or the United States itself? You know, there are very big countries. These highlight a very important issue again, that sustainable cities is not necessarily only connected with infrastructure. And that is important. Why? Because again, if the center of the development, we put the human being in its whole cycle of life, it means that the human beings are not islands. They have to relate each other with other human beings. And there's where we find the interpersonal relationships. And then is where we create, as the nature do with the body. Look at your bodies, my body, your bodies. You know, how is this body, you know, in the first place emerged or is built on? A lot of atoms. I know I have short time, but you know, we have a lot of connections